Today's Mindjitsu moment, the art of the interview. A lot of you should be interested because everybody's a podcaster these days. If I would have known that, I would have called myself a podcaster back in 1995 when I started student journalism at the University of Maryland. Been doing this 20,000 plus interviews, and so I know a thing or two about interviews. One of the interviews that jumps to mind when I talk about the art of the interview, it's a kid named Ian Loveland out of Portland, Oregon. I interviewed Ian a few years back, and I'd say for the first 10, 15 minutes, man, it was pulling teeth. It was such a difficult interview. I was thinking during the interview, I'm like, look, I'm going to have to tie a ribbon on a pig. I'm going to have to make an ugly pig pretty, right? So I'm a perfectionist. I want a really good story. Wasn't giving me any information. Real tight-lipped, a flat line interview. So he had a big tattoo on his back. He didn't have any other tattoos, but he had a big tattoo, like a billboard on his back. And I said, tell me about the tattoo on your back. He said, it's a steelhead. Okay, it's a steelhead fish. What's the specific name of that? Oh, it's a rainbow trout. And where I live, Portland, Oregon, we have world-class rainbow trout fishing. We have steelhead, and steelhead is the hardest fighting fish in the world. And he loved to go get away to the rivers, and he would look at the weather patterns, the river level patterns, all of these variables that would tell him, hey, today there are going to be a lot of rainbow trout fish out there maybe biting. And he would talk about like times where he'd have like a 15-minute struggle with this steelhead fish, the hardest fighting fish in the world according to him. And finally, he'd win that battle and he'd feel the same kind of adrenaline rush, the same sense of triumph that he would if he won in the UFC octagon. And he really opened up. And of course, during the interview, I just saw this 360 and I saw it change. And I thought, that's, as a journalist, as an interviewer, you're only as good as the information you can extract or pull out of somebody. They have to feel really comfortable with you. You have to phrase the questions properly. They have to like your energy. You look at someone like an Oprah Winfrey. One of the powers of Oprah Winfrey was her own vulnerability. She was so vulnerable. She was so willing to talk about her own mistakes in life, her own heartbreaks, that the people that she would interview felt so comfortable to be forthcoming on her show and talk about things on her show that they wouldn't on other people's. That was the power of her vulnerability. In this case, that's not what persuaded Ian to really open up. It was just, I'd found that something. I'd found that passion, that things that makes him light up, and I listened. And one of the things we should always do as an interviewer and even as a person is we shouldn't be so quick to judge people, and usually we are. We shouldn't be so quick to judge. So if someone's a fisherman or they're a hunter, right? Everybody, my friends that are vegans or whatever, they hate, the guys that are hunters, whatever. And I don't take that approach. I don't believe in that approach. I believe I want to see things through the eyes of the person I'm interviewing. It's not my place to judge. If I go into a prison, which I went into prisons and I'm interviewing those guys, it's not my place to judge. It's my place to learn. It's my place to understand the context, the hand that was dealt to this person, life through their eyes, to the extent that I can get that. And so for an Ian Loveland, it became clear to me, rainbow trout fishing is his Zen prism. He was way more excited to talk about rainbow trout than he was UFC fighting. Way more excited. That was his Zen prism. We tend to think, when we think of Zen, we think of yoga, a yoga mat. We think of meditating in the mountains. We think of monks in a monastery or something like that. Maybe even someone out running, an ultra marathon, and their mind just goes, and there's just this awesome nothingness. But if you talk, I remember interviewing Randy Couture a few weeks back, and we talked about his hunting experiences. And if you listen carefully, you realize that for a lot of hunters and fishermen, etc., it's their Zen. It's their connection with nature. It's their turning off all of the signals and signage and all the things we're bombarded with to distract us, that overwhelm our senses, sensory overload. You get to turn that off out there in the mountains. And Randy Couture was telling me, hey, I've written poetry while hunting out in the mountains, up in the woods. I've written poetry in my downtime. There's a stillness there. There's a zen. And so that's what I got to with Ian. And by the way, the martial arts experience, the same thing. I mean, I always say that it's the exhaustion of martial arts. Like sometimes I was so ADD and I couldn't really turn it off. My head was just always spinning with thoughts and thinking and thinking and thinking. And the martial arts, you know, on a jiu-jitsu mat, on a wrestling mat, or, you know, a sparring session, you get so exhausted that you get lost in that. You get lost in what you're doing. You get lost, and you've got to pay attention, 100% focus on that threat, that other person who's going to, you know, tear your arm off or choke you out or, boom, put a right hook upside your face, break your nose. I've had that happen. You pay attention. You're going to turn off the ADD. When you're exhausted, too, you just sit there, and it's just that stillness, right? And you just gave everything, and you're just, you know, you're against a wall, and the world just stops. And that's the zen, and you get that sometimes. Or just, I've gotten it driving home after practice where I can't get out of the car. I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like, I mean, you gave everything, right? And you're just like, I don't want to get up and even walk to the house. It's 10 o'clock at night. I'm exhausted. I've got to eat. I've still got to shower. I've got more things to do. I'm just exhausted. And in some ways it sucks because it's like, wow, you can barely move. But in some ways it's awesome because you're just sitting. I mean, I've sat in the driveway, the house where I used to live. I've sat in that driveway for 30, 45 minutes, not wanting to get out of the car. Not on the phone, nothing. No, nothing. Just still. My neighbors must have thought I was crazy. I was just so tired from giving everything, so not wanting to move. And yet it was zen. It was whatever, the endorphins or whatever, the oxytocin, whatever had fired, and then there was a settling. There was a settling of my soul. So I think that that's what someone like, you know, Ian Loveland, Randy Couture, when he's hunting and whatever your something is, man, cycling, rock climbing, we're chasing that feeling. We're chasing that zen. We're chasing just that time stand still thing where you're just at peace and you're not, you know, you're not many-minded or monkey-minded as they call it, right? So again, getting back to the art of the interview, that's it. Find the something that makes people light up. Find their zen prism that they want to talk about. It might be from the tattoo on their back. It might be from a scar you see. You know, the story, that might be the trigger. It might be a scar that you see on them. Never be afraid to ask about scars. It might be the tone of voice when you're talking about something. You got to read their body language and read, am I onto something? Another thing I would say with the art of the interview, always go in, do your homework, research the person you're interviewing. But always be ready to go off script. Improvisation is key for having a great interview. It's key. You can't be wedded to the script because during the interview, you may ask a question and then they may give you an answer, something unexpected, and you need to go in that direction. You need to go in that direction now. You need to just abandon, blow up the script at that point. Because things can change like that in an interview, unexpected things. You're like, wow, that's the story. We sit down before an interview and we think, oh, I know the story. I'm going to do a story about this and this and this. But during the course of interviewing someone, you realize that's not the story at all. The story's over here. Always be ready to improvise and go where the new story leads and be willing to just ask questions off the top of your head. That's the art of having a great interview. That's a must. That's an essential skill. Always be ready to improvise and blow up the script and abandon the script. Okay. So hope you guys enjoyed that today. We're going to have a lot more stuff like this. Mindjitsu, man. The Mindjitsu, the art of thinking 5 steps ahead, 10 steps ahead. We're going to Mindjitsu that shit. Right? How do you put a refrigerator up 5 flights of steps without killing your back? Mindjitsu. It's the art of thinking. It's the chess game of life, right? The mental blueprint. That's what Mindjitsu is. Spread the word. I need your support, guys. Thanks so much. Kick butt with your podcast. Go out there and get yourself a better interview, just like I did with Ian Loveland. Happy training.